unless we grieve like Mary at his grave, giving him up as lost, no Easter morning will come. And I think the last line of Wendell Berry's poem just sums up this day so well. Because unlike any other day of the year when we gather and when we worship together, we have to go back in time to truly understand the significance of the days to come. We have to go back in time before the resurrection, before Christ conquered sin and death. We have to go back in time before hope and forgiveness and redemption. And we have to stand at Christ's grave just as his followers did and give up all hope as lost. So as we worship together today, I just encourage you, enter into that place. Enter into the place as if we were at Jesus' grave. But don't stay there, because the fact is, we're on this side of the resurrection. And we have one message for you today, and it's that everything Jesus did for us, dying brutally on the cross for you and for me, it's more than just a story. And the power of it is greater than your story. Because no matter what you're walking in with today, the darkness, the hopelessness, Jesus is there. He's standing on the other side of the gravestone, and he's ready to break out with the power of heaven.
The day was dark. Jesus of Nazareth dragged his cross up the hill behind him. And I can picture his face, watching those who mocked him, knowing that he would soon take their place, that he would absorb death so that they could be free. The fact that he loved like this is crazy to me. The day was gray. It's when day became night, when Jesus told Peter no longer to fight, when Jesus kissed saved and sinner alike, when Jesus left life and then gave it to me. Absorbing my darkness, he let his body bleed. But this is our victory, because this isn't just a story. It's a vision of God's future glory. He was the King of the Jews, beaten black and blue. This isn't just a story, it's the truth. That the Son of God gave his life to love you. And what could we do to earn it, to deserve it, or muster up the words to describe it? It was the day my soul began to breathe. The day my King showed me what reckless love truly means, hanging on Calvary.
Me and my mom are very similar. People tell me that. Me and my mom were like best friends. She was very close with God. I think that was always really inspiring for me. I always felt like my mom was a woman of peace. Like whenever I was with her, I always felt like she brought peace to the situation. She was just a really strong woman, and really, like, everyone always felt like very loved by her and taken care of by her. So we went to St. B emergency room because she was just not feeling well. Like, just her stomach was always upset, and that's when we found out that she had cancer, colon cancer. And then in a couple of weeks following that, we found out that it was stage 4 cancer and that there was not really much they could do. So I think that was in October 2016, and then she passed away end of November 2016. So it was really quick. It was really hard to grasp that was actually happening, and like, I don't know, I don't think it really hit me until like months after she passed away. But I like, the one thing that stands out to me for sure is, like, after she passed away, like, God has never seemed more real. It was really, really cool. Like, I felt like he was right with me.
When we went to the Sea of Galilee, I thought I would take a rock. And I picked up a rock for myself, and as I was sitting there, I thought, I'm going to pick up a rock for somebody else. And I had a certain person in mind who I was going to give that rock to. When I got home, I put this rock on my windowsill along with the second rock, and I just didn't have a freedom to give it to that person that I had in mind. And I can't even explain to you why. I just didn't think I should do that. And so it just sat on my windowsill.
So she had this jar of rocks that she kept, and every time she like went to for a walk or just went traveling somewhere, whatever, she always picked up a rock and put it in this jar. And on this jar she had written hope on it. It's just something that she did.
And then several months later, we had a baptism at Riverwood, and I had the honor of baptizing Alex. And the day that she was to be baptized, I was getting ready for the service, and I really felt a very strong prompting, and I believe it was from the Lord, to give Alex this rock. And my first thought was, when I heard this whisper from Jesus, was, I don't think so. You know, I don't know Alex all that well, and she might think it's just super lame that I'm giving her a rock. Like, who does that? And then as the day went on, it just kept getting stronger and stronger. No, I felt I'm supposed to give it to her. So I chose to do that, and I found a little bag and put the rock in there and went to church.
So on the day of my baptism, I remember just feeling like I really wish my mom was there, or like I just really wanted her to know that that was happening. And so I got to the church, and Pastor Carolyn had given me this rock, and she said it was something that she had picked up when she went to the Sea of Galilee.
And right away I was thinking, oh, like, I don't know if this really meant what I hoped it would mean.
I don't think she really knew why she was giving it to me, but like immediately I just had to hold back my emotions, because I felt like her giving that to me was like God, I felt like my mom was giving it to me, and I really felt like that was from God, like reminding me and showing me that like He's with my mom and He's with me. And
so we did the baptism and the service, and I went home, and the next morning, Sunday morning, I opened up my email before going to church, and there was an email from Alex. And in the email, Alex said something along the lines of, you know, that rock meant more to me than you could ever know. I wasn't able to say anything right in that moment, because I was really feeling emotional, but you need to know that it means so much to me, because my mom used to collect rocks. When she would go different places, she would pick up a rock and bring it home as this memory of that place.
I think for me a big thing was realizing that God is so aware of what we're going through and doesn't just care about big picture stuff, and making sure the big picture stuff in our life is okay, but also the small details, and just comforting us in that way too. He knows you better than you know yourself, and so I think that's been really comforting, that He is right in the middle of whatever situation that I'm going through, and bringing hope, even when it feels like there is none left.
I think I've always dreamed, and I know we always talked about, one day we would have a family and we'd settle down. That was always kind of our hope and our dream for the future. About 2.5 years ago, we got pregnant for the first time and experienced a miscarriage on January 1st. Spent 2 days in the hospital. It's difficult. You kind of have this glimpse of, are we going to start a family? Is this real? Can we keep going? We started to plan again and found out on the second last day of the school year that I was pregnant again. And so we went through that summer and we hit the end of first trimester, and we were like, yes, we did it. Everybody says that first trimester, if you get to the end of that first trimester, you're in the clear and you're good, you're safe. We started building
built a nursery. Yeah.
Started building the nursery. Planned with, bought all the stuff, planned with work, and we were ready to go. We had our baby shower at the fire hall, and everyone came, and got everything that we needed, and I think a week later I started my mat leave, and it was just time to be done work. So I was 37 weeks pregnant and went off on mat leave. A couple days in, I was at home in the evening and Joel was out, and started feeling something, and I thought, oh, it's time to go. And I'm looking at the clock and I'm timing things and texting Joel and I'm saying, when are you coming home? And sure, he came home around midnight, and we looked at the clock some more and looked at the timer some more and threw everything in the car, and off we went to the hospital.
We got to the hospital after all this excitement and anticipation, and the nurse came and tried to look for his heartbeat and couldn't find anything. So then sure enough, the obstetrician came and she wasn't able to find a heartbeat either. And so she told us that it looks like it's a stillbirth. It looks like he has passed away. So he was already gone before we even got to meet him.
I don't even think I really realized that I would have to, I don't think it clicked that I'm still gonna have to deliver this baby. I just thought, now what? And I stopped and I froze. And it wasn't until Joel said, you know, now comes the hard part. And at that moment I was like, but how? How do we do this now? And we, just after 1 o'clock in the afternoon, delivered our son. And he was 5 pounds, 6 ounces. He was 19.5 inches long. 10 fingers, 10 toes. Everything was there, nothing missing. And he was just beautiful. And then we realized he wasn't crying, and that we wouldn't hear him cry.
He was perfect.
His name is Noah Aaron, and Aaron is after his grandfather.
I've been a strong believer my whole life. And I sat in that hospital room and I was wondering if I would ever step a foot into church ever again. I wasn't sure. And I'm not proud to say that, but it was not a good place to be in. I play drums at church. Ben had asked me if because it was so close to Noah's birth, he asked, would you be okay to play? I said, absolutely, I would love to play. Playing brings me so much joy, and I just love being there. So I was like, why wouldn't I want to do that, right? And then
our plan was, we'll bring him with us.
Yeah, we'll bring him along. It'll be a great time, right? I was super happy to play for my son the first time. That's what I was looking forward to. And it didn't end up happening that way, and Ben said, well, I'll schedule someone else. I said, no, now I need this for an entirely different reason. And man, I tell you, I think I played way louder than I should have that week. I'm surprised you guys let me come back after that. But I always say I wanted to make sure that he could hear me. So it's a joy, hope. These are words that I was never sure I would use again. You know, sitting in that hospital room. I didn't sleep for 26 hours there. I didn't eat for 30. You know, it was one of those things where you're like, is this it? Like, what? After all of this? But I mean, here we are a year later, surrounded by people that we love and talking about this, and it's incredible the peace and joy that God has provided for us. Because we still had a son.
Yeah. We're still parents, even though we don't get to do the everyday parenting. We're still parents.
Working in his father's carpentry shop, Anybody walking by would have never guessed that this simple peasant was going to command such a following. But he knew that his days in the carpentry shop were numbered because there was a greater calling on his life. You see, there was political unrest. The government was being oppressive, and the people were beginning to stir, and they were looking for someone to lead them. So he began to tell his followers that the mandate of heaven had fallen upon him and that he would be their Savior. The year was 1628, and his name was Zhang Zhanghong, nicknamed the Yellow Tiger. He essentially became the Robin Hood of China of the 1600s, fighting the oppressive and repressive Ming dynasty. He didn't live very long. After being a carpenter, he went on to be this rebel leader, and then he was killed by the Ming dynasty's soldiers at the age of 41. And that's when the official historians of the Ming dynasty began to write about him. And they told these fantastical stories of his conquests, how he and his people had killed 600 million people in China, even though the population of China was only 150 million at the time. They told of these horrific atrocities, many of them true, some of them way too graphic to even talk about in church today. But they also told about his millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of gold and coins and relics that he had stolen from the people, stolen from the villages, and had hoarded for himself. And so a few decades after his death is when historians believe that the myths and the legends really became solid in the Chinese history. Let me tell you one of the myths that was going around. It turns out that the Yellow Tiger had amassed all this incredible treasure trove of wealth, and he was afraid that the Ming dynasty was going to move in and steal it. So he decided to commandeer 1,000 boats and go down the Mingjiang River and head south with his treasure trove. And so they did this, and the soldiers of the Ming dynasty caught wind of it, and they ended up attacking this convoy of 1,000 boats. And so the Yellow Tiger said to his men, listen, everybody, throw all of the treasures and all the coins and all the gold overboard into the river, and once this battle is over, we'll come back and we'll retrieve it. However, the Yellow Tiger was killed before he could ever retrieve that treasure. Fast forward 400 years. And for the last century, year after year after year, the schooled and amazing professors in the Chinese universities and the archaeological scientists have been teaching the history of China to their students and have been teaching about the legend of the Mingyang River treasure. And every year they say, look, here's how this legend developed. Here's where the story came from. Here's how this fairy tale became part of our culture. And they continue to teach their way through this stuff. What's very interesting, though, is that 11 years ago, there was a farmer who was digging near the river, and he was digging an irrigation ditch, and he came across a silver coin. Now, it's law in China that you have to turn that into the authorities, so he turned it into the authorities to be assessed by the archaeologists, but no archaeologist was interested. They were not going to waste their time chasing some Mingyang River treasure myth. And so they continued to teach in their universities all about the history, but they ignored the coin. A few years later, another farmer was digging, and he came across a gold relic. And was according to law, he had to turn it into the authorities, so he did, and they began to look at it, and the archaeologist said, oh, no, this is nothing. There's nothing here. This whole Mingyang River thing is just a myth. It's just a legend. And that's when things began to get really, really interesting. You see, for some reason, the people in the area began to really enjoy fishing at night, and nobody could quite figure out why. And then some local families who were very, very poor suddenly started driving some really nice cars and started buying houses, and nobody exactly knew what was going on. And then in 2014, the local police began to notice that there was this unusual number of scuba diving enthusiasts in this one area of the river. And all these Scuba diving clubs would come into this area, but no archaeologist from the great universities, from the great hallowed halls of education would come down and look, because they were not about to waste their time on a myth. Finally, in December 2015, the experts from the Palace Museum and from the State's Archaeological Society put on their overalls, and they went down and they got dirty and they began to dig, and what they discovered was that this was so much more than just a story. The Mingyang River treasure was actual historical fact. In fact, last year, 2017, the Chinese archaeologists dug up 10,000 relics from this collection that had been dumped by the yellow tiger into the river. And they are now worth hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. What everyone thought was just an ancient story turned out to be so much more than a story. Well, Jesus tells a similar story. Maybe you've read it in Matthew chapter 13. He says this: God's kingdom is like a treasure hidden in a field for years and then accidentally found by a trespasser. The finder is ecstatic. What a find! And proceeds to sell everything he owns to raise money to buy that field. Now, whenever Jesus tells one of his parables, whenever Jesus tells one of his stories, he's expecting the listener to find themselves in the story. He's expecting the listener to pick a character and identify with that character in the story. And if I was to ask you, well, who do you identify with as a character in the story? Just about everybody would say, well, that's easy. I'm the person walking through the field. And the story goes like this, that I was walking through the field of life one day, and I stumbled across the gospel. I stumbled across this story of the cross. I stumbled across salvation and eternal life, and I realized it was so valuable that I went and sold everything I had, figuratively, spiritually speaking, and I went and turned it all in, so that I could buy this field, so that I could gain the treasure. And I got to tell you, that preaches. That really does, because the Bible says we need to be willing to leave things behind in order to go after this priceless treasure of the gospel. But as I was reading this and looking at the story, I saw a problem that began to emerge in that interpretation. You know what the problem is? The problem is you can't buy the gospel. What Jesus Christ did on the cross, it was a free gift of grace. We don't have to go and sell everything we have and liquidate everything we have and get rid of everything we have so that we can go and buy the field. And so I began to look at this, and I thought, you know what? We, in essence, are morally bankrupt people that have nothing in our lives to barter or to sell or to trade. So I don't know that in this story, you are the person walking through the field. I don't know if that's your character. Then you say, well, if that's not my character, then which character am I in this story? Am I the person that owned the field in the first place that got bought out? Am I the person working in the pawn shop that this person came and sold all the possessions? If I'm not the person walking through the field, then where am I in the story? Can I tell you where you are in the story? Or at least where I think you are in the story. In the story that Jesus told, you are the treasure. You are the treasure. Jesus says, hey, let me tell you something. I'm going to tell you a story that is so much more than a story. I am going to tell you how the kingdom of God operates. And here's how it operates. The Son of God, the Christ, the Messiah, was walking through a field one day and tripped across a treasure of enormous value. It's a treasure that had been lost and had buried and had been forgotten. It was a priceless treasure that he could not do without, and that treasure was you. So he ran back to town, he gathered up everything he had, he sold it, and on the auction block of the cross, he bankrupted himself so that he could buy that field and buy you back. That is what I believe the storyline goes. And I want to show you a picture right now of this in the Old Testament, in Isaiah chapter 43. Listen to these words. I paid a huge price for you. That's how much you mean to me. That's how much I love you. I'd sell the whole world to get you back. Trade the creation just for you. Now that was Old Testament. And a few hundred years later, Jesus actually shows up, and God does not trade the whole world for you because it wouldn't be enough. So what he ends up doing is he ends up ransoming his son. and trading the life of his son for you. This whole Good Friday story, as it turns out, the whole story of Jesus being nailed to the cross and sacrificed and bankrupt and all of this, and giving his entire life, it's all a treasure hunting story. And the treasure is you. Let me prove this to you in just a couple of minutes. Luke chapter 19, listen to this. For the Son of Man came to seek and to dig up and to find and to save those who were lost. He went on. This whole story is a treasure hunt intention story. Let me tell you about what Paul said in Ephesians 1:18. He said this, and this is my prayer for you as well. I pray that your hearts will be flooded with light so that you can understand the confident hope that he has given those he called, listen to what he calls us, his holy people who are his rich and glorious inheritance. You are his rich and glorious inheritance. He will go to the ends of the earth to find you. You are the treasure. And what Jesus did 2,000 years ago is so much more than a story. And yet, in the hallowed halls of academia all across our world, you have incredibly brilliant professors and archaeological scientists and the most brilliant minds saying, oh, hang on a second, that's just a myth. That's just a legend. That's just a fairy tale. We'll show you where that fairy tale came from. Well, I got to tell you that this afternoon, I am so incredibly honored today to gather with you night sailors, to gather with you scuba diving, treasure hunting enthusiasts, to gather with you spiritual peasants who are made rich as we come together in this time and we showcase the relics of our faith. And what are the relics of our faith? There are stories. But there's so much more than just a story. Proof that Jesus and his good news is more than a story. That the power of what Jesus did 2,000 years ago, the shock waves is still rattling down the corridors of history and reverberating in our lives today. That Jesus still shows up in the midst of a young lady's loss of her mother. That Jesus still shows up and whispers to our souls, moving our hearts and our hands to care for somebody and give somebody something we don't even know why. That Jesus takes the empty hands that should be holding a newborn baby, and he puts into those hands an out-of-this-world peace and comfort and hope and praise. It's proof that Jesus digs down into the dirt of your mistakes. In fact, Jesus is so good at it, digging down into the mud of your disappointments and into the muck of your brokenness. And when he does, he ecstatically cries out. When he finds you, he cries out, oh, what a find.
So I guess I met my wife through a mutual friend. My friend Jordan was dating her sister, and we started to connect, and there's a spark there, and we started hanging out, and she put up with me. She was nice, she was pretty, she was fun. We had a great relationship, we got married, and we bought a house on Sutton. At the time, I thought that we were for sure in this forever, yeah. About 3 years ago, I had a major incident of my trust being broken, and we tried to push past it, but my area of communication where I side on aggression, and she would side on passiveness, and I think that I kept chasing her to try to fix things, and she kept trying to ignore it so that I would forget about it. And I don't feel like I said anything hurtful, but the way that I was approaching her was not a loving way. Yeah, so she asked for a month. I moved in with my friend Jordan. I slept on his couch for a month, and then the time came for that month to be over, and I came home, and she had left. When we stopped being together, I felt like I was alone. It felt like there was nothing I could do, like, to fix it, and I felt like everyone was watching, everyone knew, and that I was the only one who was getting a divorce. I was the only one who was going through anything like this. I felt like there's literally like nothing that I could do to fix it, or to be fixed, or like, there was nothing I could do to make my life right. It was broken. One of the reasons that me and Rebecca stopped being together was I was an alcoholic. And I mean, you start drinking with some friends, and eventually just drinking every weekend, and then weekends turn into, well, we're hanging out Thursday, might as well drink. We're hanging out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, let's have a few. And I think that sort of lifestyle really impacted my mental state. Like I was just drinking. That's all I was doing. And eventually that leads to health problems, and I threw up blood, and I needed to get right. And that's around the time that she left too. So it was a lot at once, and I was broken and trying to fix things, and then a friend invited me to Riverwood. So and we started going for lunch after church on Sundays at the warehouse 11:15. We called it Lunch Club, and it was a lot of fun. And I don't know if I would have really come back to church if it wasn't for the connections that I made and the friendships that I made, and just made me feel normal again. So my life now is a lot of volunteering at church, a lot of filling my time with studying the Bible, praying. At work, one of the biggest problems for me was, because I have a labor job, I can think all day, and when you get caught in those bad thoughts, it really can do a number on your perspective. And one of the major things that I've done differently is I pray. Whenever I catch myself spiraling in these negative thoughts, I turn to Jesus and I give it to him, and I start praying for my small group. I start praying for my friends that aren't saved, and for just for the thoughts to go away. Just having someone to give it to, having Jesus to give it to, was important. I think that at the beginning, when she left me, I was a whole different person. That by turning to God, by turning to Jesus, the death that I was in, the separation and the pain, he's taken it all away. He's forgiven me for everything that I've done, and it feels like I can finally live. When you fully engage in Jesus, he's going to show up in your life and change you. And he changed me.
So if you are a follower of Jesus, I want to invite you to what we simply call the table. It's actually a ceremony that's been going on for about 2,000 years. It started on the very night when Jesus was betrayed, just before he was crucified. It harkens back to a time when all the disciples got around a meal, and they had bread and they had wine. It was the Passover meal. And so for us, this ceremony is about taking a piece of bread or wafer, and as a Christ follower, remembering that Jesus gave his body, and allowing this little piece of bread to remind us that Jesus gave his body for me. And then we take the cup, which has some juice in it, and as a Christ follower, we allow that cup to remind us that Jesus shed his blood for me. And when we take these things, we celebrate that we are a found people, that we are God's treasure. So the next few minutes, here's how this is going to work. Some of our servers are going to come, they're going to pass the bread, and you just take a piece of bread, take a cup of juice, and just hang on to it. But we're going to do something different, so I want you to listen here. I'm not going to come back up and lead you through this. This is something so incredibly intimate and personal between you and God. So sometime during the next song, here's how you could self-lead yourself through. First of all, take a moment to hold those elements and let them remind you of what Jesus did on the cross for you. And then pray a prayer of thanks, just in your own heart. Just thank God for what he did, and use your own words to connect with him. And then sometime in this song, when you feel you're ready, just take the bread, take the cup, and celebrate that you're a found person. So I'm not going to lead you, okay? You're just going to lead yourself through this when we get going. Now, you might be sitting there today and going, well, hold it a second. I'm not what you just said. I'm not a follower of Christ. I've never decisively given my life. I don't even know if I believe. And I guess you have a couple of options. The first one would be to just let that tray pass right on by. And I just want to let you know right off the hop here that nobody's going to judge you. Nobody's going to look at you funny. In fact, we actually, around here, we celebrate people who are investigating. And we respect both your journey and your honesty. So if you're not a follower of Christ, we'd say, hey, you know what? Why don't you just observe and let that pass on by? Or you have another option. And the other option is simply, maybe this is the moment that you decisively give your life to God. Maybe you say, you know what? I think I'm ready to be found. I think I'm ready to allow God to be my Lord and Savior. And if you're kind of at that place, you might say, well, how does that happen? And I would say that's an incredibly intimate experience between you and God that I have no business jumping into. But I think it happens with a prayer from you to God. Now, you might say, well, I wouldn't even know where to begin to pray. Well, there maybe I can help you a little bit. I could lend you a prayer, and maybe this prayer would be helpful. I think it would be something like this: Jesus, thank you for valuing me as priceless treasure. God, I want to be found by you, and I want to give you my life. Please come in and forgive my sin and be my Savior and my Lord. Amen. Now, if you prayed that prayer, I don't want to be weird about this, and this might be really lame, but I have something I'd like to give you. I'd like to give you a rock. Hear me out. I went and picked these rocks specifically for today, and they're all red. And the reason they're red is because today is Good Friday, and I want you to be reminded of the blood of Jesus. But I also picked these ones because they're polished. And wherever you decide to put this rock, I would love for you to be reminded every day that you are a found treasure, that you are a priceless treasure to our Lord. Now, I know no non-awkward way of doing this. I don't know how I can get this rock to you without it being awkward. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hang out at the front, and if you prayed this prayer this weekend, or maybe last weekend when Danny was here, I want to invite you to come, and I'd love to give you a rock. I want to let you know that this is our fourth service today. One of our services, a lady came and said, can I have a rock? And I said, absolutely. I said, when did you give your life to Christ? She says, I don't know that I have. I said, that's cool. Could we talk about that? We had a really great conversation. I had another guy walk by, and he said, hey, put my name on one of those rocks. I'm not ready today, but I'm coming back. It's like, that's cool. That's honest. I had some kids come and say, I gave my life to Jesus. Can I have a rock? Yeah, sure, you can have a rock. Somebody else said, I gave my life to Jesus 3 weeks ago. I know it doesn't really count, but can I have a rock? Absolutely, have a rock. Somebody came and said, you know what, I walked into this church 3 years ago on Good Friday as an atheist. And that began my journey. Can I have a rock? Absolutely. I'm giving rocks away to everybody. So if you want a rock, I'd love to give you one if it would be meaningful to you. And we're going to do that at the close of the service. But for right now, I'm going to invite the servers to come, and we're going to take communion together. Remember, you're on your own. Pray a prayer, take communion, celebrate that you are found, and let's worship together.